So good morning. My name is Neil Sutton. I'm the editor of SP&T News. During this difficult, challenging time we're facing with COVID-19, we wanted to assemble some people from around the security industry just to get a sense of how the virus and the pandemic is affecting everybody. So I'm just going to do some quick introductions. So I've got Richard McMullen, who's a partner of security solutions at FCI in Ottawa. Colin Bodbyl, who's Chief Technology at Stealth Monitoring in Toronto. Patrick Straw, the Executive Director of CANASA. And Roger Miller, President of Northeastern Protection Service in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So thank you, gentlemen, very much for joining me today.
Morning.
Morning, everyone.
Morning. So I thought we'd just get into some questions. So this is just information we want to share with our audience, just have sort of a chat about how things are going. Maybe the first question I want to tackle is how monitoring stations are dealing with the challenges right now. Of course, it's going to affect all businesses, but how are monitoring stations in particular dealing with potentially having people work from home out of necessity, and how that impacts operations? Maybe, Colin, do you want to get us started on that one?
Sure, yeah. We've got 3 monitoring centers dispersed across 3 different countries. So we're, in some ways fortunate from that perspective that we can work within 3 different sort of situations. It's definitely challenging, and being able to balance between those monitoring centers is key for us right now. But then even internal to each of those monitoring centers, we have a US and a Canadian monitoring center independently. Being able to practice things like social distancing, having a ramp up in cleaning crews, being able to get employee confidence as well, so that they will come in and they understand that we're doing everything we can, and everything at least according to what government recommendations are, is definitely key to keeping people, safe and healthy right now. Aside from that, work from home, the majority of the staff that can work from home, of course, that's option number 1. What is challenging these times is that a lot of technology and a lot of products that are used for monitoring platforms and purposes are not necessarily designed for people to work from home. For instance, that Toronto Monitoring Center is a UL listed monitoring center, and so that puts us into a different category as far as trying to maintain the UL standards while dealing with the quarantines and social distancing requirements. So it's definitely challenging. Following the government recommendations as much as possible, having space to allow people to work in different areas, and having the right support staff as far as cleaning crews go and sanitization has definitely been key.
Thanks, Colin. Patrick, I know you've been in touch with monitoring stations since this whole thing started. Can you just maybe give us some feedback on what they're telling you?
Yes, certainly. We have a monitoring station committee within CANASA that's been meeting on a weekly basis. In fact, it meets this afternoon. I think very much a lot of the things that Colin said, everybody's had to adapt to people working from home, cleaning issues, social distancing. We've tried to distribute as much information as we can from not only Canadian sources, but also the American Monitoring Association, SIA. One thing that's been really refreshing to see is the cooperation between the Canadian monitoring station community. They've been offering each other's assistance. There's a wide range of sizes of companies. A lot of the companies have more technical resources than others. There's been issues with employees who weren't in a situation where they could work from home because of the situation at home. So I think that everybody is, scrambling to try to maintain whatever level they can. Certainly ULC also published some information on what they were prepared to do as far as the adaptation of maintaining services to a professional level during the pandemic. So I think a lot of people have had to learn real fast.
For sure. So just generally, just the whole panel, like in terms of the work from home situation, how much have you had to adjust your operations for the faced with the prospect of potentially the large majority of your staff having to work from home, or in what situations are they able to keep doing what they were doing before? Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, so, we've obviously, like everyone, had to adjust. The security integration world has changed. Thankfully, we're able to continue providing those services, whether it's installation, where we're able to be on site, and certainly the service world being out and about in the community, and stressing the importance to keep those safety measures front of mind for all of our folks, whether that's not sharing their mobile phones or sharing tools on a job site, using public health agency recommended guidelines, all of those things to keep everyone, both our team members and of course our clients and the community safe. So we've seen a dramatic decrease in a lot of the day-to-day. Our business is a little bit unique where we don't necessarily have that residential or small business component, but we've seen a lot of organizations from outside of our region that have reached out to say, can you do some service for us at site A and site B, because we don't want to necessarily drive from Toronto or Montreal or other sites. That's there. A lot of the stuff we're able to do over the and remotely. We've got a security operations center that helps look after our clients that we have service agreements and monitoring for. So a couple of weeks back, we actually took those gentlemen that work in that operations center and deployed them to their home office to work remotely, still able to do all the things that they were doing before, just from different locations. So putting those mitigating steps in early, I think, is going to be beneficial as we try to plank this curve and get some sense of normalcy back.
Mm-hmm. Roger, what are your thoughts on that?
Very much consistent with what Richard has said. We're still working in our office. We're kind of rotating. We get some folks working from home, some folks are coming in. We've got enough space where, for the most part, people can close their door to their office and they're not exposed to other people. We're consciously reminding everybody to social distance within the office. We don't have the get-togethers at lunchtime where we sit around and talk about today's events like we would normally do at a lunch period. We're not visiting clients like we normally would be, or visiting sites for quotes, that sort of thing. On the guard side of things, it's almost business as usual, if there's anything usual about all this, where the guards are still going to work and they're still providing the service. But they're, for the most part, largely closed sites. University, colleges, and other sites that we don't have the same level of employees or public. So again, there's no issue with social distancing. And we've been very actively pushing out the Health Canada and the province of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick Health Chief Medical Officer's messages of social distancing, thorough and frequent hand washing, stop touching your face. Some very basic tactics that will ultimately help us stop the spread of this virus. But for us, it's I've been saying to some folks, it's weird because it's business as normal, but there's nothing normal about it. So it's we're still plugging away and providing service delivery. On the tech side of things, there's some sites we can't get into. In Nova Scotia, it's unique because the state of emergency exempts construction sites from the restrictions. I don't know why, but there's a couple active construction sites we're working on, and contractors are free to come and go. Again, we've advised our technicians social distancing and keep yourself clean, keep your tools clean, keep away from the other folks, regardless of how they're distancing themselves from you or from each other. This is all our individual responsibility, and it's this is part of our PPE now, so to speak.
Okay, so you're still able to access the sites you were working on, like projects that were underway before this whole thing started? Are they able to continue more or less on schedule? Has anybody been able to start any new projects since this started?
We've started a couple new projects. Again, it's somewhat easier because there's not a lot of folks around in the workplace. So we can get in, get our work done, maintain this safe distance, And again, following all the expert guidelines. So we want to make sure we're not putting people in an unsafe position. But yeah, it's like I said, kind of business as usual in some cases, but very
Richard, yeah, please.
The same for us. A lot of sites, we typically are in there and they're very, very quiet right now. I can tell you, we do a lot of work in government space here in Ottawa, and some of these large office towers or complexes that would have literally thousands of employees sometimes have very, very few. And, that's the new reality. And that allows us to get work done efficiently and effectively without necessarily coming in contact with people as well.
Okay. And for you, Colin, are you still able to, access sites? Have you seen any uptick in terms of people asking for more monitoring of maybe facilities that are now vacant?
Yeah, we've definitely seen that. We're not having major issues accessing sites. The majority of the work we do is outdoors or at least external to the building, and so again, it's not that much of an issue. Customers, even if the property is shut down, they're okay to have security technicians come in. To your point about an increase in demand, I think we've definitely seen an increase in demand in certain areas. Probably the biggest impact we're seeing is commercial sites that have gone from having employees there during the day and not needing monitoring to being shut down and requiring monitoring services during the day. And I think that's probably, it's a big change for us. I'm sure it's a big change for other monitoring centers as well, is that typically there's not a whole lot of activity during the day, and that's when you have your lowest staffing needs, and that's now changing. So fortunately, daytime is easier to get people to come in than at night. So that's working in everyone's favor, I suppose. But there's definitely been a change to the monitoring hours and the requirements of these customers.
Patrick, have you had any feedback from technicians, integrators, people that need to still access job sites, just in terms of how they're managing their workload right now?
Yeah, we have we started up a Facebook site a few weeks ago, which has exploded, and we're probably going to be close to 1,000 member companies. And because everybody's at home, the activity on it is ridiculously high because so people are commenting on everything. And I've also spoken to probably about 100 people across the country this week without everybody calling and asking different things, a lot of emails. And essentially, I think what everybody here has said is the residential business is probably ground down to a pretty quiet, probably a minimal, if any, amount of face-to-face sales activity for obvious reasons. This morning I spoke with the president of one of the larger manufacturers in the country, and certain aspects of the business, the distribution business so far appears to be fairly steady. I've talked to two of the major distributors in the last 2 days. Whether that's people, stockpiling for future service, we're not really sure. But I think there is an opportunity certainly created with the buildings being empty. But the other side of that is just making sure that the people can have their employees go in, and I know emergency service is being very carefully scrutinized, and that arrangements are being made before people go to a site to make sure that there isn't any problem with social distancing. And I think this is sort of avalanched so quickly. Now that people are starting to settle into it, I think the companies are getting a little more efficient and more able to deal with staffing. I think the monitoring stations have one of the biggest challenges for sure, other than whatever effect revenue is going to be had by, reduction in work just generally.
Right. So you mentioned distributors. It looks like the supply chain is still sort of pretty much fully functional. Just in maybe Roger, Richard, and Colin, are you able to access the equipment that you need? Is everything still going according to plan in that regard?
We're seeing some empty shelves, if you will, Neil. I mean, the distributors and manufacturers have been doing a great job in terms of trying their best to keep the shelf stock and keep material handy. We've got some great distributors in Canada that are able to reach out across the country and into the U.S. counterparts, but there are delays with some products, which is understandable. I don't think it's anybody's fault. When government enacts state of emergency in a province-to-province basis, it's difficult for the manufacturers, the distributors, everybody to really grasp immediately what that means. But for the most part, it's been great. A few items that are not readily available, but nothing that we can't overcome, and hopefully keep us moving until this is over.
Thanks, Roger.
And we haven't seen any real decrease in the supply chain, especially here in the city. They've been able to fulfill orders. We've got a fairly large warehouse and a lot of inventory that we've been able to draw on, and that's been beneficial, obviously. But yeah, so far so good.
Good. Colin?
So we haven't seen any real issues with supply chain yet. There's been a few delays here and there, but nothing major. We're definitely building up extra inventory based on what our forecast would have been prior to this. And so, we're positioning ourselves for a shortage. Our belief is that there probably still will be delays, but it may be, it might only come in a few months' time once we see the effects of what hit China originally, shortening the supply chain there, and that will eventually roll through to the manufacturers in other parts of the world. So we're still expecting there to be a slowdown in, or at least some delays in product, but we think it will, it'll follow each wave maybe 3 to 6 months later.
Okay. And the other major thing I'm hearing is there's been a huge demand for guard services at this time. Roger, have you seen that demand for guards increase in the last few weeks? I think we've lost Roger's
especially
audio.
in the last 10 days. We've seen a surge, obviously, in guards, and a lot of it in the retail sector. You okay? Or
Yeah,
am I okay?
Yeah, I think we're just having some lag on your end.
Is it still coming through, Neil?
Yeah, we can hear you. Your video is lagging behind, but it's okay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so we're seeing the surge mostly in the retail side. Okay, the retail side has been surging because retailers that are allowed to stay open have a maximum number of occupants they can have in the building. So the security guards are being called on to make sure people are social distancing outside the retailer and allowing a certain number of people inside the store or the retailer at a given time. So there's that side of it. There's offices that are vacated that still have to provide service to building tenants. So we're, again, manning some of those posts as well. So there's a surge, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon.
Okay. Patrick, have you seen all that activity in the guard sector lately?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen on stuff that I follow on social media and that there is a lot of situations now. There was some news last night in Ottawa. I think the very obvious thing is that all these commercial facilities are now empty, and residential crimes are probably dropping significantly because everybody's home. There are companies that are not only realizing they might have been deficient in electronic security because they were 24-hour operations, et cetera, or the fact that because of this situation, they simply have to lock their doors. So, I don't have any specific information, but the vibe that I've heard is very similar to what Roger said, is that there are places that not only are buying things like cameras for these solely because of this predicament, and also having to use guards in the short term, at least, to protect their buildings. A lot of them had to shut down very quickly.
Right. Okay. So maybe I'll just ask one more quick question. I know everybody's busy, so I want to be just aware of everybody's time. Are there any sort of lessons we can take away? Because this sort of, I guess there were warning signs that this could have happened, but it seems like it escalated extremely quickly. Just in terms of how people can adjust their security operations, or sort of any sort of takeaways for the security industry that can help us in the future if we face another emergency like this.
I'd maybe make one comment in that I participated in some U.S. conference calls with the U.S. associations, and that a lot of the information that ULC, and the U.S. Learned in the disasters that happened, like Hurricane Katrina, that they'd already had a first taste of what would happen if you had to really drastically reallocate your resources. This one, because it's happened everywhere, certainly has made a lot of companies probably have to do things that they hadn't specifically had to do before, but there has been a lot of sharing of information, I think, which has been helpful.
Okay.
I would just add to that, hindsight's 2020, right? So I think that we can all look back and learn some lessons. It's sort of business as unusual right now, right? So we've been nimble enough and sort of safe enough to do things like limit access to our office. We took folks' mobile temperature before anyone came into the office and started to distance our teams that were out in the field, especially, and limit that contact. And I think moving forward, these are lessons that are going to have to form part of our normal routines. That's one of the lessons. And the mobile office space is clearly going to take hold in our society, and I think we need to adjust for that. Whether that's helping to guard cybersecurity elements of things, the video conferencing and other elements, all those things are going to be vital in the weeks and certainly months ahead.
Thanks. Roger, maybe just a few quick thoughts before we wrap it up.
Yeah, we had, we established a pandemic plan back in the early 2000s after the SARS event. So this is a test of our pandemic plan and see how it works. But just like Richard said, there'll be some forward changing activities that are happening that are going to carry on forever. For us, it's been communicating with our clients and with our staff effectively, efficiently, and giving them accurate information, because there's a lot of inaccurate information and a lot of inaccurate advice out there in terms of medical advice, people trying to kill the virus with hair dryers and drinking hot water and silly things like that, that sometimes people just don't know where to go for accurate information, helpful information. So we've learned that we need to push that out to both our employees and our clients in a timely manner, kind of like a daily update, so they're getting effective, timely, accurate information that's going to benefit them and hopefully benefit society as a whole.
Thanks, Roger. So maybe Colin, just for some closing thoughts.
Sure. Not to be redundant here, but I think the whole work from home thing is obviously the biggest key learning here, and a lot of things that we have in our industry are set up for centralized operations, and so I think we'll see a lot of innovation stemming from this as far as how we get those roles into a position where they could be completed from home. Obviously install and integration needs to be done on site, but monitoring operations are traditionally done in a monitoring center, and there's a lot of controls that we're able to put in place by having them in a monitoring center, but that will have to change eventually. And then further to that, the rest of the employee base, it's not just for security, it's for every business, will need to position themselves. So, even if it's not a pandemic, there's other issues that can cause your business to need to be dispersed and work from home. So I think, again, that's probably the biggest key learning. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I can add.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for your time today. I know we're dealing with some unique challenges. I wish everybody the best of luck to get through the next weeks and months as we adjust to this. And yeah, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.